There's a moment we all know too well, that knot in the stomach, that heaviness in the chest, when life feels like it's pressing down on us with no end in sight. Stress has a way of convincing us that what we're going through right now is permanent, that this is the new normal, and that we might never find our way back to peace. But the truth is, nothing in life is permanent. Every season shifts, every storm eventually runs out of rain, and every dark night is followed by morning. What feels unbearable today is part of a passing moment, not a lifelong sentence. We're not meant to carry the weight of forever on our shoulders, but when we're in the middle of stress, our minds trick us into believing that forever is exactly what we're facing. And yet, when we look back on our lives, we see a trail of moments we thought we'd never get through. And we did. We don't just survive them. Often, we find ways to grow stronger, braver, and more compassionate in the process. So, as we gather here, I want us to hold on to a simple truth. Everything is temporary. The struggle, the uncertainty, the fear, they are visitors, not permanent residents. And just as they arrive, they will also leave. Our role is not to outrun them or pretend they're not there, but to remind ourselves, even in the hardest of times, that this moment will not last forever. There's a moment we all know too well, that knot in the stomach, that heaviness in the chest, when life feels like it's pressing down on us with no end in sight. Stress has a way of convincing us that what we're going through right now is permanent, that this is the new normal, and that we might never find our way back to peace. But the truth is, nothing in life is permanent. Every season shifts, every storm eventually runs out of rain, and every dark night is followed by morning. What feels unbearable today is part of a passing moment, not a lifelong sentence. And yet when we're in the middle of it, our brains love to tell us stories. This will never end. I'm stuck. I'll never feel okay again. Those stories feel so convincing when we're exhausted or overwhelmed. But if we pause and look back, we can see that we've lived through countless moments that felt impossible, and still, here we are. Stronger, wiser, sometimes even softer in ways that matter most. That's the power of impermanence. It teaches us that life is a flow, not a fixed point. Think about the last time you faced something that nearly broke you. At the time, maybe you thought, I can't do this, I won't get through it. And yet, you did. The day came when the weight eased, when the tears slowed, when laughter returned. Even if just for a moment, that moment was proof. Stress is temporary, pain is temporary, fear is temporary. They are all chapters in a bigger story that is still unfolding. So the invitation today is simple. When stress shows up, don't buy into the lie that it's forever. Instead, remember that you are living inside a moving river. Everything is shifting, everything is flowing, everything is temporary. Even the hardest parts of life are carrying you towards something new. And the most beautiful part is that you already have evidence written in the story of your own life that you've survived the temporary before, and you will again. There's something so profoundly human about the way stress weaves itself into our lives. It doesn't matter where we come from, what titles we carry, or how much success we've gathered along the way. Stress is that uninvited guest that shows up at everyone's door. Sometimes it creeps in quietly, other times it storms in, but sooner or later, we all know its weight. And what makes it even heavier is the feeling that we are carrying it alone, as if no one else could possibly understand the unique texture of our worry. But the truth is, every single person in this room, every person we pass on the street, every friend we hold close, and every stranger we've never met, they've all tasted stress. They've all wrestled with those nights when the mind refuses to rest, those mornings when it feels impossible to climb out of bed, those moments when the smallest task feels like the heaviest burden. I think part of what makes stress so powerful is its ability to convince us that it is permanent. It plants the seed in our minds that whispers, this is your forever now. And when we believe that, we lose sight of the bigger picture, the ebb and flow of life, the way everything is always shifting. Stress thrives in that illusion of permanence. It thrives when we forget that the very nature of life is change. And yet, if we pause, if we look back over the stories of our own lives, we can see that we've been here before in different ways. We can remember the countless moments when we thought, this is too much, I can't do this. And yet, somehow we did. We're here breathing, listening, surviving, and not just surviving, but carrying lessons from all those times that we thought would never end. It helps sometimes to think about nature. Imagine a storm. When it's raging, when the thunder cracks and the sky darkens, it's easy to believe the storm will never leave. But storms always end. They never have the power to stay forever. Stress is much the same. It arrives like a storm, sometimes gentle, sometimes violent, but it always passes. The danger is that in the middle of the storm, we convince ourselves that the clouds will never break, that the rain will never stop. But if we remember the countless storms we've already lived through, we can carry that quiet assurance that this too will move. And yet, I know how hard that is in the moment. When stress is here, logic doesn't always soothe us. Telling ourselves this is temporary doesn't always stop the racing thoughts, the pressure in the chest, or the restlessness in our bodies. But maybe it's not about erasing the stress. Maybe it's about allowing ourselves to be human in it, to admit that this is hard, that this hurts, that this feels overwhelming, And then to also hold the gentle reminder that feelings are visitors, not permanent residents. They arrive, they stay for a while, and they leave. Just like joy comes and goes, so does stress. Just like laughter isn't with us every moment, neither is fear. There's a rhythm to all of it. I think sometimes we get trapped in the belief that being stressed means we are failing in some way, as if other people have figured out how to live without it. But what if stress isn't a sign of weakness? What if it's simply proof that we're alive, that we're invested, that we care deeply about the people and responsibilities in our lives? Stress often shows up where our love and values are rooted. We worry because we care about outcomes. We feel pressure because we want to show up well for others. Seen this way, stress isn't evidence that we're broken. It's evidence that we're human, reaching and stretching, even when it feels hard. And the shared truth is this: you are not the only one. The person sitting next to you has felt it too. The people you admire most, the ones who look calm and put together, have also had nights when they couldn't quiet their minds. We often forget that stress is universal. And when we forget that, shame slips in. Shame tells us we're the only ones who can't handle it. But if we speak it out loud, if we allow ourselves to be vulnerable enough to say, I'm struggling right now, we create space for someone else to say, me too. And in that moment of shared humanity, the burden lightens, not because the stress disappears, but because we no longer feel so alone in it. It's a strange paradox, isn't it? That the very thing we most want to hide is often the very thing that connects us most deeply with others. When we admit to stress, when we allow ourselves to be seen in our imperfection, we create the possibility of connection. And connection is what steadies us through the temporary storms. It doesn't erase them, but it gives us something to hold on to, a reminder that even if the stress is here, so is support, so is empathy, so is love. So when I stand here and talk about stress, I don't do it from the perspective of someone who has mastered it or eliminated it. I speak from the perspective of someone who is still learning, who still wakes up some days with a heavy chest and a racing mind. But I also speak from the perspective of someone who knows from lived experience that everything changes, that the heaviness always shifts, that light always finds its way back in, that no feeling, no challenge, no storm lasts forever. I want to start with a story because sometimes the only way to explain stress and the illusion that it will never end is to talk about how it feels when you're standing in the middle of it. A few years ago, I found myself in a season where everything seemed to pile up at once. The deadlines, the responsibilities, the personal challenges, all of it felt like a tidal wave, and I was convinced I was going to drown. I remember lying awake at night, staring at the ceiling, my thoughts racing so fast I could barely catch a breath. I remember telling myself over and over again, this is too much, I can't do it. And the truth is, in those moments, I believed it. Stress has a way of narrowing our vision, of making us feel like the tunnel we're in has no exit. But here's the thing. That season didn't last forever. At some point, the tide receded, the work eased, the personal struggles softened. The storm that had felt so permanent moved on, just like every storm before it. And when I look back, I realized that what felt like the end of my rope had actually been just another chapter, one that taught me something I couldn't have learned any other way. In hindsight, I could see the lessons, I could see the growth. But in the middle of it, all I could see was the heaviness. That's the tricky thing about stress. It convinces us that it's forever, even though our own lives prove to us again and again that it isn't. I share that story because I don't think it's unique. Maybe your story looks different. Maybe it was the stress of raising children, or the weight of financial pressure, or the heartache of loss. Maybe it was something you couldn't name out loud, something that lived quietly inside of you, invisible to everyone else. Whatever it was, you've had that moment where you wondered if you could keep going. And yet, here you are. That's the beauty of vulnerability. When we share our stories of struggle, we remind each other of our resilience. We remind each other that we are never truly as alone as we feel when stress tells us we are. There's a tendency in our culture to present ourselves as if we've got it all figured out. We post the smiling pictures, we share the polished updates, we hide the messy middle. And yet, it's in that messy middle that real connection happens. When we're willing to say, I was scared, I felt overwhelmed, I didn't know if I'd get through it. That's when the walls come down. That's when someone else can take a deep breath and whisper, me too. It's in those moments of honesty that stress begins to loosen its grip, because stress thrives in isolation, but it weakens in connection. When I think back to that hard season, I don't remember the details of the deadlines or the endless lists. What I remember most is the moment I admitted to a friend that I was not okay. I remember how terrifying it felt to say those words out loud, to drop the mask and let someone see behind it. And I remember how, instead of judgment, I was met with compassion. Instead of rejection, I was met with understanding. That moment didn't erase the stress, but it did remind me that I wasn't carrying it alone. And sometimes that reminder is enough to keep us moving forward until the storm begins to pass. Vulnerability is not weakness. It's not the thing that breaks us. It's the thing that binds us. When we allow ourselves to be seen in our struggle, We open the door to empathy, to compassion, to a kind of strength that doesn't come from pretending we have it all under control. And that matters because life will keep giving us seasons of stress. That's not something we can avoid. What we can do is shift the way we meet those seasons, not by shutting down and pretending, but by leaning into the very thing that makes us human, our ability to connect through our stories. Think for a moment about the people you admire most, the ones who inspire you. Chances are it's not the people who seem untouched by difficulty. It's not the people who present perfect, polished lives. It's the people who have been through the fire and were brave enough to tell the story. It's the people who admit that stress knocked them down, but also share how they stood back up. Their courage to be vulnerable gives us courage to believe we can do the same. And maybe that's the heart of this idea that everything is temporary. It's not just about reminding ourselves that our stress won't last forever. It's also about remembering that we don't have to hold that truth alone. We can say to each other, I'm struggling right now, but I know this won't last. We can be the reminder someone else needs in their storm, just as they can be the reminder we need in ours. So when stress shows up, and it will, it's not about being fearless or flawless. It's about being honest. It's about being willing to tell the truth of our experience, even if our voice shakes. Because in that truth, there is connection. And in that connection, there is strength. One of the most powerful truths we can hold on to in the middle of stress is this: nothing lasts forever. Everything in life is temporary. The joy, the pain, the uncertainty, the clarity, the fear, the love, every single one of these states comes and goes, just like the rise and fall of the tide. But when we're in the middle of stress, when the weight feels so heavy that we can barely take a breath, it's easy to forget this. Our minds trick us into believing that what we feel right now will stretch endlessly in the future, that the discomfort, the fear, or the exhaustion will never ease. And yet, when we look back on our lives, we can see proof written in our own stories that this is never true. Every moment we thought would never end did end. Every feeling that seemed too big eventually shifted. Every challenge that felt like forever eventually gave way to something new. Impermanence is one of the few guarantees we get in life. Nothing stays the same. The seasons change, the days turn to nights, the years pass whether we're ready or not. Our bodies change, our relationships shift, our roles evolve, and even the strongest emotions eventually lose their intensity. Think about the last time you felt heartbreak. At the time, it probably felt unbearable, like a permanent crack in your chest. But over time, that pain softened. It didn't erase what happened, but it changed shape. Think about the last time you felt so much joy you thought your heart might burst. As much as you wanted to hold on to it, that joy also shifted. It didn't stay in the same form forever. That's the rhythm of life. Every single experience, whether painful or beautiful, is temporary. The challenge is that when stress shows up, it convinces us otherwise. It says, this is who you are now. This is how life will always feel. That's the voice of fear. But if we zoom out, if we remember the bigger picture, we realize that every emotion, every situation is like a cloud passing through the sky. Some clouds are light and wispy, easy to ignore. Others are heavy, dark, and stormy. But no matter how overwhelming they seem, they never stay forever. The sky always clears eventually, and the clouds always keep moving. Stress is just one of those clouds. What gives this truth so much power is that it changes the way we hold our experiences. When we remember that everything is temporary, we stop gripping so tightly. We stop believing that this difficult moment defines our entire future. We begin to trust that we can endure it, not because we're unshakably strong, but because we know it won't last. And there's comfort in that. There's comfort in realizing that the very nature of life is change, which means no matter how bad this moment feels, another one is already on its way. I think about it often in terms of the seasons. Winter always feels like it stretches on forever, cold and dark and heavy. But then, without fail, spring comes. The ground thaws, the air warms, new life pushes through. The same is true of our lives. Stress and struggle feel like winter, barren, endless, isolating. But no matter how long winter feels, it never wins. Spring always arrives. The trick is to remind ourselves, while we are standing knee deep in the snow, that change is inevitable, that warmth will return. And this truth doesn't just apply to our struggles, it applies to our joys too. The moments we love most are also fleeting. The laughter around the dinner table, the quiet peace of a morning sunrise, the feeling of being held by someone we trust, all of it is temporary. And while that might sound sad, it actually makes those moments even more precious. Knowing that they won't last forever gives us permission to savor them more deeply. If everything were permanent, we'd take it all for granted. But because life is always shifting, because nothing stays exactly the same, we learn to cherish what we have when we have it. Impermanence is both the reason we suffer and the reason we can endure. We suffer when we try to hold on too tightly, when we resist the truth that things will change. We feel despair when we believe that stress or hardship is forever. But when we lean into impermanence, when we accept that change is the only constant, we find resilience. We find the courage to keep going, even in the darkest nights, because we know that morning will come. So when stress tells you that this moment is permanent, that you are stuck here forever. Try to remember the bigger truth. Try to remember the countless times you have already made it through something you thought you couldn't. Try to remember that your story is still being written, and this chapter is not the whole book. Everything is temporary. The stress, the heaviness, the racing thoughts, they are passing clouds in a vast sky. They are winter days before the thaw. They are storms that eventually give way to clear air. And if you can hold on to that truth, even when you don't feel it, you create space for hope. You create space for the possibility of something new, something lighter, something brighter. You remind yourself that just as no joy lasts forever, no pain does either. Life is movement, life is change, life is impermanence. And that is the very reason we can endure whatever comes our way. Resilience is often spoken about as if it's some rare quality reserved for a chosen few, but the truth is, resilience lives in all of us. It's not about being unshakably strong or immune to life's difficulties. It's about learning to bend without breaking, about trusting that even when life knocks us down, we will rise again. And one of the most powerful ways resilience takes root in our lives is through the recognition that everything moves, everything changes, everything ebbs and flows. Stress, fear, disappointment. None of them last forever, and neither do joy, ease, or certainty. Life is always shifting between the highs and the lows, and our resilience is born from learning to trust that movement instead of fighting against it. Think of the ocean. Waves roll in, one after another, sometimes gentle and sometimes crashing with force. If you've ever tried to stand in the surf and resist the waves, you know how exhausting it can be. The water pushes against you, and no matter how strong you are, it eventually wears you down. But if you learn to move with the waves, to bend your knees and let them carry you for a moment, it changes everything. Life works the same way. Stress is a wave, joy is a wave, loss is a wave, love is a wave. Each comes in, stays for a time, and then recedes. Resilience isn't about blocking the waves, it's about trusting the rhythm of their comings and goings. I remember a time when everything in my life seemed to be unraveling at once. The kind of season where you wake up each day bracing yourself for whatever bad news is waiting. It was work stress, family challenges, and personal doubts all colliding together, and it felt like I was drowning in it. I remember thinking, I can't do this, I can't carry all of this. And yet somehow I did. Not because I suddenly became stronger than I had ever been, but because I slowly realized that this season, as overwhelming as it felt, wasn't forever. I began to see that each day carried its own rhythm. Some moments felt unbearable, others offered small breaths of relief. Over time, the waves of heaviness gave way to calmer waters. And looking back, I can see that what carried me through wasn't brute strength, but a quiet trust in the ebb and flow of life. We often think resilience is about holding everything together, about standing tall no matter what happens. But more often, resilience is about allowing ourselves to fall apart and still finding a way to keep moving. It's about giving ourselves permission to feel the fear, the exhaustion, the frustration, while also remembering that these feelings are not permanent. They are part of the flow, and just as they arrive, they will eventually leave. When we remember that, stress loses some of its power over us. We no longer see it as an endless sentence, but as a passing visitor. There's a gentleness in this way of seeing resilience. It doesn't demand perfection. It doesn't require us to carry ourselves with unshakable confidence all the time. It simply asks us to trust the process, to trust that life is movement. It reminds us that resilience is not built in the absence of struggle, it's shaped by it. Every time we faced something hard and made it through, even if we stumbled, even if we cried, even if we doubted ourselves, we were building resilience. We were teaching ourselves, little by little, that we could survive the ebb and flow. The beauty of this is that resilience isn't just about survival. It's also about growth. When we learn to trust the rhythm of life, we begin to notice things we might have missed otherwise. We notice the way stress teaches us patience. We notice the way pain deepens our empathy. We notice the way uncertainty forces us to find courage we didn't know we had. These aren't lessons we ask for, but they are gifts that come with moving through hard seasons. They remind us that resilience isn't just about enduring the storm. It's about letting the storm shape us into someone more tender, more brave, more whole. There's something comforting in knowing that resilience doesn't require us to fight every battle with fierceness. Sometimes resilience is simply whispering to ourselves, this won't last forever. Sometimes it's taking one small step when everything inside of us wants to stop. Sometimes it's reaching out to someone we trust and saying, I need help. Sometimes it's just breathing and waiting for the next wave to pass. These small acts of endurance matter because resilience isn't always dramatic. Often it's quiet. It's found in the decision to keep showing up day after day, even when we feel tired, even when we feel afraid. And in those small decisions, we prove to ourselves that we can endure more than we think. We prove that resilience isn't about being unbreakable. It's about being willing to move with the flow of life, to trust that stress will not be the final word. Each time we remind ourselves of this, we loosen stress's grip on us. Each time we let ourselves trust the ebb and flow, we find a little more peace in the middle of the storm. And over time, We realize that resilience isn't something we have to go searching for. It's something we've been carrying inside of us all along, waiting for us to notice. Hope is often seen as something fragile, something we hold onto with trembling hands, afraid it might slip away. But the truth is, hope is one of the strongest forces we carry within us. It is what keeps us moving when stress feels overwhelming, when the weight of life feels like too much to bear. Hope whispers to us that change is not only possible, but inevitable, and that even when we can't see the way forward, there is a path unfolding just beyond our sight. Setting a compassionate tone for ourselves and for others is what allows that hope to grow, because it creates space for courage to rise and for trust in the process of change to take root. When we're stressed, the natural instinct is to brace ourselves, to tense up and try to control everything. We tell ourselves that if we just push harder, if we just hold on tighter, maybe the storm will pass quicker. But in doing so, we exhaust ourselves even more. Hope asks something different of us. It asks us to soften, even when everything in us wants to harden. It asks us to trust that we don't need to see the full picture to know that change is on the horizon. It asks us to believe, even when it feels risky, that this moment isn't forever. And it asks us to extend that same compassion to ourselves that we so easily give to others. Courage isn't always loud or dramatic. Sometimes courage is the quiet decision to wake up and face another day, even when yesterday felt unbearable. Sometimes it's admitting that we're not okay, that we need a hand to hold, that we can't carry the weight alone. Sometimes it's simply letting ourselves feel what we feel without judgment, trusting that those feelings will shift with time. This kind of courage grows stronger when it's nurtured by hope, because hope reminds us that even in the darkest night, the sun always rises. The process of change may not happen on our timeline, but it always happens. Nothing stays the same forever. I think about times in my life when I felt stuck, convinced that nothing would ever shift. Stress had such a grip on me that I couldn't imagine another way of being. And yet, without me even realizing it, small changes were already happening. New opportunities began to appear. My perspective started to shift. People showed up for me in ways I couldn't have anticipated. Looking back, I can see that the process of change was always at work, even when I felt like everything was standing still. Hope didn't erase my stress, but it gave me the courage to endure it long enough for change to catch up to me. This is why it matters so much to speak with compassion, to ourselves first, and then to others. When we are gentle with ourselves in stressful times, we create space for healing. When we speak kindly to ourselves instead of piling on self-criticism, we make it easier to notice the small signs of change happening around us. And when we extend that compassion outward, when we remind someone else that they're not alone, we help hope grow in them too. It becomes a shared strength, a shared light, something we carry together instead of in isolation. We live in a world that often tells us to toughen up, to hustle harder, to wear our stress like a badge of honor. But what if the real strength lies in doing the opposite? What if resilience is born not from pushing harder, but from softening into hope, from leaning into courage, from trusting that the process of change will come, even if it doesn't look the way we imagined? There's a profound kind of strength in being able to say, I don't know how this will work out, but I trust that it will. That kind of trust doesn't make the stress vanish, but it makes it bearable. It gives us the patience to wait for the shift, the courage to endure the middle, and the clarity to see the lessons hidden within the struggle. Every moment of stress we have ever lived through has carried us somewhere new. Maybe it carried us towards strength we didn't know we had. Maybe it carried us toward deeper empathy for others. Maybe it carried us toward a fresh start, a new path, or simply a greater appreciation for what we had once taken for granted. Change is always happening, always moving us forward, even when it feels invisible. And hope is the lens that allows us to trust that movement instead of fearing it. So when we speak to ourselves in times of stress, let the words be kind. Let them be compassionate. Remind yourself that you've been here before in different forms, and each time you've made it through. Remind yourself that courage doesn't mean you don't feel afraid. It means you choose to keep going anyway. Remind yourself that the process of change is already at work in ways you may not see yet. Hope and compassion are not luxuries. They are survival tools. They are what carry us through the stress of today into the possibilities of tomorrow.